Referring to Sunday's passage of the falsely labeled so-called Inflation Reduction Act, the always soft-spoken, never prone to newspeak Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Democrat of New York, offered this Sunday afternoon.
This bill is going to change America for decades.
Oh boy, is that an understatement. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV. You got it, it's the ever-classy Chuck Schumer. And he was, of course, referring to the passed along party lines Kamala Harris-decided
I can first.
51-50 victory that he and his cohorts achieved with the final vote on their so-called Inflation Reduction Act Sunday, which now pushes it into the House of Representatives for reconciliation, as they call it, and likely swift passage. And Schumer was, of course, correct in what he said, since every bill that the legislative branch passes slams Americans for decades, most often to the detriment of most Americans and their debt-saddled progeny. And by the way, if any of your friends think that they should interpret Schumer's comment as meaning that the change will somehow be a positive one, then inform them that one doesn't put out a fire by adding buckets of gasoline to it. Folks like Schumer, Harris,
I can first.
Joe Biden, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat of Arizona, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, and even the faux budget protector, Senator Joe Manchin, the Democrat of West Virginia, will not reduce inflation by disgorging $369 billion into the world over the next few years. And by the way, everybody, it was $325 billion a couple weeks ago, which gives you an indication of what exactly they've been doing over the past couple weeks by adding more spending to it. Jeez, that's what the wrangling was about, not inflation fighting. It had to do with more gasoline to the pork spending inferno. That is nearly $370 billion, everybody, almost half of the biggest discretionary so-called U.S. budget item. The $754 billion allotted in 2022 to be showered on the U.S. military and, of course, sundry weapons handouts to international friends. And, by the way, pardon this guy's lack of enthusiasm, but Schumer's rhetorical flirtation with self-seen omnipotence either lacks any concept of what inflation is, or if he is aware of what inflation is, it reflects the diabolism of a sadistic torturer. Let's take a further look inside this wondrous legislation and study it on three levels: the economic, the constitutional, and the moral/philosophical. Fred Lucas reports for the Daily Signal, quote, "The Democrats' 755-page bill increases green energy subsidies, expands the IRS, and enacts other initiatives long sought by the left, and authorizes $430 billion in new spending. That's supposed to be offset by $740 billion in new revenues from tax hikes and increased enforcement. That includes the hiring of 87,000 additional IRS agents to conduct audits and seek tax liens." That last bit about the additional IRS agents is extremely important. It will see the IRS double in size. It will make the budget of the IRS rise by at least 600%, with, as Senator Ted Cruz, the Republican of Texas, told Fox News' Maria Bartiromo,
"The Democrats are making the IRS bigger than the Pentagon, plus the Department of State, plus the FBI, plus the Border Patrol combined. The IRS is going to be bigger."
Because, of course, it's a service. Remember that now. Adds Lucas, quote, Senator Michael Crapo, Republican of Idaho, offered an unsuccessful amendment that would have prohibited the IRS from using the $80 billion in new funding to audit taxpayers earning less than $400,000 a year. Because, as we will all remember for decades, right, Senator Schumer, the Democrats promise that this here glorious bill won't raise taxes on those in that class envy below $400,000 a year category. Indeed, Lucas reminds us as well, quote, that came as Senate Democrats and President Joe Biden have claimed that their bill would not raise taxes on anyone earning less than $400,000 a year. However, the nonpartisan Congressional Joint Committee on Taxation determined that taxes would increase by up to $16.7 billion for Americans making less than $200,000 in 2023 and increase by $14.1 billion for those earning between $200,000 and $500,000. A Heritage Foundation analysis determined the bill would impose a $4,500 tax increase on the average American household over the next decade. So let's look at the large economic picture. You have a federal government that, as the Free Thought Project reported in January, along with a handy chart that they provided to add power to the punch, quote, in just the past 3 fiscal years, federal spending has swollen to nearly $7 trillion a year, up from $4.4 trillion in fiscal year 2019. Spending was $6.6 trillion in 2020 and $6.8 trillion in 2021. If we want to put this into perspective, we can take a look at the monetary supply at the beginning of 2020. Which showed just $4.019 trillion in circulation. By January of 2021, that number had jumped to $6.7 trillion. But this was only the beginning. By November of last year, the number climbed to $20.354 trillion in circulation, meaning that since January 2020, the United States has printed nearly 80% of all dollars in existence. And in the U.S., what the media claim is inflation, but really is a measure of price increases due to an already inflated money supply, well, that recently came in at 9.1% year over year as of June. Many people who teach or work in the field of economics like I do can tell you it likely is twice that 9.1%. But of course, the answer from Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, Sinema, Manchin, Harris,
I can first.
and many others is not only to spend more worthless cash, thus forcing the government to issue more bonds to be purchased by the money-inventing Federal Reserve, thus inflating the money supply even more, which is the definition of inflation. But they want to extract, as ABC News reports, $739 billion in taxes from the economy. This isn't it's just a shift of better spending priorities, elitism world that we're talking about here. This is theft and redistribution of wealth into politically chosen fields, taking away the free market ability, the sheer freedom for us to spend that earned income in areas we determine are productive and worthwhile. That includes all these special gifts to special states that they've come up with, like Kyrsten Sinema's Arizona, which will see $4 billion in, as ABC puts it, resources to combat drought in the western U.S. And this Inflation Reduction Act includes special pork handouts to the climate cult for favoring green energy corporations. Yeah, these are giant handouts for wind and solar and electric vehicles that ABC glosses over with this, quote, most of the $369 billion the Inflation Reduction Act would spend on climate would go to renewable energy tax credits that would prop up clean energy technology such as carbon capture, hydrogen, renewables, and energy storage. The climate, otherwise known as batteries. The climate provision would also provide consumer tax credits for home energy efficiency improvements and for the purchase of clean vehicles. Yeah, let's study that for a moment. If these are tax breaks, as ABC puts it, then why are they included as part of the $369 billion the Inflation Reduction Act would spend on climate? Again, as ABC puts it. Well, that's because they aren't neutral stoppages of taxation for government-preferred behavior on the part of the lemming-like and viral enthralled lithium and cadmium-loving climate cultists. They're handouts depicted as tax rebates and grants. They're designed to further tilt the economy towards the anti-economic non-options of wind and solar, when those are not as efficient and productive energy sources as oil, natural gas, and coal. And by the way, you know those Obamacare portals in your state? Well, they'll get more money. Quote, aside from climate spending, the reconciliation bill also would allocate $64 billion to extend expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies by 3 years through 2025. And virtually not one bleeding penny of this is constitutional. From fighting drought near Sinema's home district to a pipeline going through Joe Manchin's West Virginia, one that somehow was included in this rabidly anti-oil, anti-natural gas climate change bill. Almost as if it was a giveaway to get Joe's vote. Then we have more federal spending on prescription drugs. We have these so-called drug price negotiations that'll be coming for Medicare and Medicaid that will, of course, shift costs to people paying their own prescription way or using their own private insurance. And then we've got the $4,000 to $7,500 so-called tax credits, which will be given even if you don't owe taxes if you buy electric vehicles. And we have the extended federal subsidies to people getting Obamacare and, lovely, the methane emissions reduction program. Yeah, see if any of these conform to the U.S. Constitution. The enumerated powers are limited and they're easy to read. And even if any of them were constitutional, they wouldn't be moral, because the only way the government gets its money is through making people pay in taxes. Those taxes will be forced from us or our kids in order to pay off the metastatic debt. But we will pay, even as the new federal spending floods more useless cash into the system. This won't lower inflation at all. It will only lower our living standards and our already flatlining level of liberty. It's insulting, it's crass, and it's craven, and it surely will pass the House in a matter of days. Well, thanks for spending this time with me, everybody. I hope I've given you good information. I hope you might want to spread this around to friends, family members, neighbors, co-workers. Please visit MRCTV.org. The Media Research Center in its 35th year is going strong. When you're there, go to the MRC Store. Help out the MRC and the team doing yeoman's work. Find us on YouTube. See us in the comments section. Find us on Rumble. Please like and subscribe on both channels. When you get to Rumble, hit that little plus because it helps us on the algorithm. And of course, they don't censor us there. You can find us on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And on Twitter, I am @GardGoldsmith. And on Gab, I'm @GardnerGoldsmith. Thanks so much, everybody.